What happens when the man who built a business from scratch walks into one of his own stores and no one knows who he is? Victor Langston sat in his office, staring at a complaint email from a former employee who'd quit the night shift at store 11. The message was short, bitter, and filled with words like inhuman, ignored, and unsafe. But what got to Victor was this. The CEO built something great, but clearly hasn't walked through the back door in years. He leaned back, she was right. Victor had started the cleaning chain 15 years ago with one mop, one van, and a dream to make enough to support his sick mom. Now he had 20 stores across 4 states and over 300 employees. But somewhere along the way, he'd stopped really looking at what was happening on the ground. He called his assistant. "I need you to schedule a fake hire for night cleaning at store 11, he said. "Name it under someone new. Make sure the manager never finds out who I am. I'm going in next week." "Under what name?" she asked. He paused. "Let's go with Vince Lake." Victor hadn't stepped foot in store 11 in over 3 years. It was in a rougher part of town, and the turnover rate there was always high. That should have been a red flag, but he'd let his district manager, a guy named Colin, handle it. Colin always gave the same answer: "We're short-staffed, but it's manageable." Victor didn't want to be recognized. He dyed his hair dark brown, trimmed his beard into stubble, wore thick glasses, and added 20 pounds worth of padding under his janitor's uniform. He even practiced walking with a slight limp to throw people off. No one at store 11 had ever met him personally. It was a corporate location, most of the hiring was done by local managers, and everyone saw the CEO as just a name on a paycheck. He arrived at 9:45 p.m. for his 10 p.m. shift. The manager, a woman named Carla, barely looked up when he walked in. "You're the new guy?" she asked, chewing gum. "Yeah, Vince." "You're late." "It's 9:45. She gave him a look. "We start at 10, but all right, follow me." She didn't offer a handshake, just tossed him a beat-up mop and pointed toward the back. "Locker's broken. You'll have to keep your stuff in the supply closet. Don't leave anything valuable." The break room stank like sour milk and burnt popcorn. The ceiling tile above the microwave was missing, wires dangling. 2 other night crew members sat at a table, an older man with calloused hands and a younger woman who looked barely 20, rubbing her shoulder like it hurt. "Hey," Victor said, trying to sound new and unsure. The man gave a tired nod. "Darren." The girl didn't look up. "Valerie." Carla clapped her hands. "All right, let's go. Vince, you're with Valerie tonight. She'll show you the ropes." They walked in silence for a bit. Valerie finally said, "You ever done wax stripping before?" "No." She sighed. "Of course you haven't." In the next 4 hours, Victor scrubbed floors with a broken buffer, emptied trash bags that leaked onto his shoes, and nearly slipped on a soapy stairwell with no caution signs. Valerie didn't say much, but she worked hard faster than anyone should on a torn-up ankle, which he noticed when she limped slightly between rooms. "You all right?" he asked. "I twisted it a few weeks ago, didn't have time to see anyone. Carla said if I call out again, I'm gone." Victor clenched his jaw. "That can't be right." Valerie gave him a look. "You new here or just stupid?" By 2 a.m., Darren had to stop to take a break. He sat on a bucket, wiping his forehead. "Take your 15, Victor asked. Darren shook his head. "We don't get breaks, not really. Carla docked me last time, took more than 5 minutes." Victor's stomach turned. "That's illegal." Darren shrugged. "Tell that to Carla or Colin, they don't care, we're just night ghosts to them." Victor kept quiet. He wanted to scream. He wanted to pull out his ID and fire Carla on the spot, but he wasn't ready. Not yet. At 3:30 a.m., Valerie asked if he had gloves. "The trash chute's clogged again. You need gloves unless you want to get covered in who knows what." I wasn't given any. She opened her locker. Here, use mine. You sure? Yeah, I'll just wash my hands. Not the worst thing I've touched tonight. Victor put on the gloves and followed her to the chute. What he saw made him gag rotting food, soaked paper towels, something moving near the bottom. This happens a lot, he asked. Every week, pipe's broken, they won't fix it. Colin says it's low priority. Victor had to look away. He'd built this company on pride, and now this. He finished the shift in silence. Valerie handed him a water bottle before leaving. You kept up better than most, she said. You'll probably last. Victor nodded. Thanks, see you tomorrow. She gave a tired smile. If my ankle holds up. He watched her walk off into the cold, limping slightly. Victor stood in the empty hallway, disgusted not with the job, but with himself. He'd let this happen. And tomorrow night, he'd dig even deeper. Victor returned the next night just before 10, slipping through the back entrance with a quiet nod to the same tired security guard, who only glanced up before returning to his crossword. No one greeted him. The hallway lights flickered as he passed, casting shadows that made the stained linoleum look worse than it already was. He clocked in using the wall-mounted touchscreen, which took 3 tries before it registered his ID. Valerie wasn't there yet. Darren was, sitting on an overturned crate near the mop sinks, wrapping duct tape around the handle of his cart. Still using the same one from last night, Victor asked. Darren didn't look up. There's no backup. Carla said the order for replacements got delayed again. Victor crouched down, examining the rusted wheels. This thing's a hazard. Darren gave a dry chuckle. So's walking in here most nights. Before Victor could respond, Carla's voice cut through the hallway without warning. Move it, Darren. You're not getting paid to sit. Darren stood slowly, biting his tongue. Carla turned to Victor. You, Vince, you're with me tonight. Valerie's out. Victor straightened. She all right? Not your business. Carla didn't look at him as she turned on her heel and walked off. Victor followed. She led him to the employee restroom area. The air was thick with ammonia and something worse. Carla tossed him a bottle of cleaner without a label. Use that for the toilets. Don't waste it. We're short on supplies. Victor examined the bottle. What is this? Carla shrugged. Does the job. He hesitated. The liquid inside was cloudy. There's no safety sheet, no gloves. Carla rolled her eyes. You want gloves, bring your own. This isn't a spa. Victor's gut turned. He pressed forward. The restrooms were in worse shape than anything he'd touched the night before. One of the stalls had a broken hinge, the door barely hanging on. The sinks were stained orange where the pipes leaked. A roach darted behind the trash bin when he moved it to sweep. As he scrubbed, he heard Carla shouting from the hallway. I don't care if he's new. He does what I say when I say it. Victor kept his head down, rinsing the cloth in a bucket of murky water. A few minutes later, a tall man with a red maintenance shirt stepped in. He looked around and muttered, "Good luck," before disappearing back out the door. At break time, Victor stepped toward the supply closet to grab his water. Carla was already there, leaning against the frame, scrolling her phone. You don't get a break, she said without looking up. Victor kept his voice calm. The law says otherwise. She looked up sharply. You trying to be a lawyer now? No, just want 5 minutes to drink some water. Carla stepped forward. You think you're special? You think the rest of us get to take it easy? This is a real job. You don't like it, walk. Victor met her eyes. I'll take my 5 minutes. She stared at him for a long second, then shrugged. Your funeral. Victor stepped outside into the alley behind the building. The cold hit him harder than expected. He leaned against the wall and took slow sips of water. A minute later, Darren stepped out beside him, holding a half-eaten protein bar. "She ever talk to you like that again, walk straight to HR," Darren said quietly. "There's a number posted in the break room, top right corner of the board." Victor nodded, though he already knew the number. He'd approved the signage himself 2 years ago. "She's been like this long?" he asked. Darren chewed slowly. "Since Colin promoted her, last year. Before that we had a guy named Marcus. Tough but fair. Carla's different. Picks favorites. Cuts hours for people she doesn't like. Threatens to fire folks if they speak up." Victor frowned. "No one's reported her." Darren looked away. "You think HR listens to janitors?" Victor stayed quiet. When they returned inside, Carla called out, "Break's over." Victor walked past her without responding. She didn't follow. Back inside, he resumed cleaning the storage hallway near the loading dock. A few minutes in, he heard a voice low, annoyed. "You're doing it wrong." He turned. A young man with a lanyard and clipboard stood there, maybe early 20s, wiry frame, sharp jaw. "I'm sorry." The man stepped closer. "You're putting the boxes in the wrong bin. That's for recycling." Victor glanced at the box. It had no label. "There's no sign." "You should know, it's common sense." Victor took a breath. "You work here." "Colin, district manager." He extended a hand without smiling. "You're the new guy, yeah." Victor shook it. "Vince." Colin's eyes scanned him like a barcode. "Carla says you've got an attitude." Victor didn't respond. "Don't make problems," Colin said. "Carla knows how to run this place. You're here to clean, not question." Victor nodded once, understood. Colin left without another word. Later that night, Victor found Valerie's locker open. Her name tag was still inside. Taped to the locker door was a pink sticky note, "Out indefinitely, doctor's note, no coverage." He stepped back. No coverage. That meant no pay, no job security, and from what Carla had said, no sympathy either. As he returned to the floor, he passed 2 other cleaners arguing quietly near the boiler room. "I told her, can't keep covering doubles," one whispered. "I've got my kid every other night." "She doesn't care," the other said. "She told me to figure it out or leave, like we got options." Victor walked past without interrupting. Every step he took added weight to the understanding. This wasn't just mismanagement, it was exploitation. At 4:15, Carla stormed into the janitor's corridor, holding a clipboard. "Listen up," she barked. "Starting next week, shift hours are changing. You show up late once you're cut, no excuses." One of the older women, Rosa, raised her hand. "But take the bus. The new time." "Then get a different ride," Carla snapped. "Not my problem." Victor stepped forward. "You can't change hours with no notice." Carla turned toward him. "I can do whatever I want. You're on thin ice already." Victor stared at her, then turned to the others. "Is anyone here okay with this?" No one spoke. Colin appeared in the doorway, arms crossed. "Something wrong, Vince?" Victor stepped forward, voice steady. "I've seen enough." He reached into his back pocket, pulled out his ID badge, and held it up. "Victor Langston, CEO." The silence could have shattered glass. Carla's face went pale. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. Colin froze, then forced a laugh. "Wait, this is some kind of..." "No," Victor said. "It's not a joke. You've both failed my employees. You've failed this company." He turned to the others. "Carla, you're done. Effective immediately." Carla took a step forward. "You can't." "I just did." He turned to Colin. "You and are going to have a very long meeting tomorrow. Until then, you're suspended without pay." Colin's mouth opened, but Victor cut him off. "Leave." They did, no argument, no defense. When the door shut behind them, no one moved. Victor looked around at the exhausted workers, the real heart of the company he'd built. "I owe you all more than an apology," he said. "This ends now." He left the building not as Vince Lake, but as Victor Langston. And he didn't sleep that morning. He drafted a list of every district under Colin's watch. Because if this was happening in store 11, it wouldn't be the last place he walked into. Victor arrived at store 11 the following night, not in disguise, not through the back door. This time, he walked through the front entrance at 9:50, still wearing the janitor's uniform. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, and the night crew glanced up from their carts and buckets with wide eyes. Darren was the first to react. "Is this real?" Victor nodded. "Yeah, I'm not Vince, I'm Victor Langston. I run this company." No one said anything. Victor stepped closer. "Carla's gone, Colin's suspended, but that doesn't fix what you've been dealing with, so we're starting tonight." He pulled a folded paper from his back pocket and held it out. "This is a direct line to my office. If anything you experience here crosses a line, you bypass management. You come to me." Rosa stepped forward slowly, hands clasped in front of her apron. "Are you replacing them?" "Interim manager starts tomorrow," Victor said. "Her name's Joanna. She's been with us 8 years, runs one of our best performing locations, and knows what it's like to work these hours. She's not corporate." He turned to the hallway. "But I'm not waiting for tomorrow to get things moving." Victor headed to the supply closet. The lock was still broken. Inside, the shelves were nearly bare, half-empty bottles, scattered gloves, and cracked buckets stacked on top of each other. He took out his phone and snapped a photo, then walked to the storeroom and did the same. He turned to the crew behind him. "We don't cut corners anymore. If you need something, you get it. If something's broken, it gets fixed. I've got a procurement team on standby tonight. You tell me what you're missing, and it goes on the order list." Darren raised an eyebrow. "Are you serious?" Victor looked him in the eye, dead serious. Valerie hobbled in a few minutes later, walking more carefully than before. Her ankle was braced this time, and her eyes narrowed when she saw Victor. "You're back," she said, "and not limping anymore." "I'm not, you okay?" "Better than yesterday," she pointed at his shirt, "so you're actually the top guy." "I am." She crossed her arms. "And you wore that uniform just to see what it's like." "I needed to know the truth." Valerie studied him for a moment, then nodded once. "Fair." Victor checked his watch. "We're going to do tonight differently. I want to walk the whole building with you. I want to see everything you deal with, and I want to hear what needs to change." Valerie gestured toward the back hallway. "Start with the mop sink. Water pressure's a joke, takes 10 minutes to fill a bucket." As they walked, Valerie pointed out issues that had clearly been ignored for months. Warped floor tiles near the mechanical room, exposed wiring above the janitor's closet, and a vent near the break room that blew out dust instead of air. Victor didn't ask why no one had reported it. He knew why. They stopped near the rear stairwell, where a metal cart was wedged awkwardly between two walls. "That's been here since February," Valerie said. "Carla told us to leave it, said moving it was a waste of energy." Victor stepped forward, leaned his weight into the cart, and slowly pulled it free. The wheels squealed in protest, but it finally rolled out. Behind it was a patch of wall blackened with mildew. He turned. "This building needs serious maintenance." "No one upstairs ever came to look," Valerie said. "They will now." When they returned to the break room, the crew was gathered around the old table. Darren was flipping through a torn-up binder that had once been the safety manual. Victor walked over. "That's still accurate?" Darren held it up. Last update was 4 years ago. Victor took it and dropped it in the trash. We'll get you the right one. He turned to the group. Can't undo what you've already been through, but I can promise this. Starting tonight, we're changing how this company works from the floor up. That includes fair hours, working equipment, and basic respect. Roser raised her hand. Does that mean we can finally get gloves without buying them ourselves? Victor nodded. We've already ordered them. She exhaled slowly and sat down. He didn't stay long after that. He wanted to give them space to work without the pressure of the CEO hovering. Instead, he drove to the nearest 24-hour supply warehouse and personally oversaw the pickup of new mops, gloves, carts, and cleaning agents. By 5 a.m., a delivery van arrived at Store 11's back lot. Joanna showed up just before sunrise. She wore a plain black baseball cap and a gray hoodie and greeted each worker by name, even though they hadn't met. Victor had briefed her during a 2-hour call the night before, and she showed up ready. She walked straight up to Valerie and extended a hand. Heard you've been holding this place together. I'm Joanna. Let's get it back on track. Valerie shook her hand cautiously, but didn't pull away. Victor stepped aside and watched. Joanna walked with purpose. Her first order was to close the back stairwell until the mildew was professionally treated. Then she assigned Darren to oversee supply distribution and gave Valerie a lighter load for the week to give her ankle time to heal. Victor caught up with Darren near the loading dock. She's different, Darren said, watching Joanna move between stations. She is. You really think the others will be like that? They will, Victor said, or they won't be working here anymore. That same morning, Victor summoned Colin to headquarters. Colin arrived 30 minutes late, wearing a blazer and jeans. He didn't sit. Victor didn't offer coffee. Sit down. Colin hesitated, then dropped into the chair opposite the desk. Victor opened a folder containing printed reports and testimony from Store 11 staff. You lied to me, Victor said. Repeatedly, you gave me reports that said Store 11 was operating at acceptable standards. You told me Carla had everything under control. Colin leaned back. Victor, I manage 6 districts. I don't micromanage every issue. You hired me to delegate. You weren't delegating. You were avoiding responsibility. Colin shrugged. Look, these people complain all the time. You give them an inch, they take a mile. I did what I thought was necessary. Victor leaned forward. You allowed a manager to threaten workers, ignore safety protocols, and violate basic labor law. That's not delegation. That's negligence. Colin scoffed. You're really going to take their word over mine? I wore the uniform, Victor said. I mopped those floors. I took the same abuse they did, and you know what? They didn't complain. They endured. You're the one who failed. Colin stood. So what? I'm fired. You're done, effective immediately. Your severance is revoked. You're lucky I'm not pursuing legal action. Colin opened his mouth, then closed it. Victor pressed a button on the desk. Security entered the room silently. Colin didn't argue. He walked out without a word. Victor turned to the window, watching the sun rise over a city that had run on silent labor for far too long. He pulled out his phone and texted Joanna a single line. How's it going? She replied a minute later. They're tired, but they're hopeful. Victor sat back, closed his eyes, and nodded. It was a start. Victor returned to Store 11 2 weeks later, this time in a charcoal overcoat and pressed shirt, his name stitched clearly on an ID badge clipped to his chest. He arrived at 9 in the morning, not at shift change, not to make a speech, but to observe the aftermath. What changes had taken root? What hadn't? Joanna met him at the front. She wore her usual work boots and dark denim, clipboard in hand. Her eyes were heavier than they'd been when she first came on board, but she didn't complain. She simply gestured toward the back hallway. "We've stabilized the schedule," she said. "Still short 2 people, but I'm rotating the team to avoid back-to-back doubles. No one's worked more than 6 nights in a row since you left." He followed her past the supply closet, which now had a functioning lock and clear labels on every shelf. New carts sat lined up against the wall, each tagged with a name. The mop handles were intact, the gloves were stocked, and the air didn't reek of mold anymore. Victor stopped by the break room. The ceiling tile had been replaced. A new microwave stood on the counter beside a small fridge with a laminated sign, "Label your items, respect each other." He nodded once. "What about Valerie?" Joanna rested her clipboard on her hip. "She's still recovering. Doctor cleared her for partial shifts. I've got her shadowing the new hire. She's good with people. I think there's leadership in her." They reached the loading dock, where Rosa and Darren were sorting supplies. Both wore matching blue polos with embroidered name tags. Darren held a checklist and waved them over. "2 boxes short on mop heads," he said. "Already called distribution. They're reshipping by morning." Victor scanned the inventory sheet. "You keeping up all right?" Darren wiped his brow with a folded rag. "It's a pace, but manageable now. We're not scrambling like before." Victor turned to Rosa. "How's the team holding together?" She adjusted her hairnet. "We're tired, but no one's walking on eggshells anymore. That matters." Victor thanked them both and continued toward the rear stairwell, the one that had been closed off. The walls were dry now, freshly painted, and the mildew was gone. A notice was taped to the door: "Closed for repairs, reopening upon safety clearance." Beneath it, Joanna's initials. Inside the main office, Valerie sat at a desk reviewing a digital schedule. She looked up as Victor entered. "Didn't expect you today." "I didn't announce it." She leaned back in the chair, ankle propped on a small stool. "It's been different. Still hard, but no one's threatening to cut my hours because of a brace." "You see yourself staying?" he asked. Valerie hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, I want to move up. I didn't realize how much I liked the work until someone stopped treating me like I was disposable." Victor studied her for a moment. "I want you to start shadowing Joanna next month. Nothing formal yet, just exposure. She'll show you the back-end system's inventory, scheduling, compliance. If it's something you want long-term, we'll talk again." She raised an eyebrow. "You sure I'm the right person?" "I saw how you carried this place while you were injured. That's not nothing." Valerie didn't smile, but the tension in her face eased. "All right, I'll give it a shot." Victor left her to the schedule and headed toward the staff entrance. On his way out, he passed a younger employee, maybe 19, tall, with a nervous energy mopping the back corridor. The kid looked up and froze. "Sir, sorry, I didn't know." Victor shook his head. "You're doing fine, keep going." Outside, the parking lot was mostly empty. A delivery van idled near the curb, the driver unloading boxes with quiet efficiency. Victor checked his phone. His assistant had scheduled meetings with HR later that afternoon, updates from other locations. 2 stores in Ohio were now under review. Complaints had surfaced since Victor's visit to store 11. The company-wide audit was expanding. Back at headquarters that afternoon, Victor entered the HR conference room, where a young woman in a navy dress stood beside a screen showing a chart of regional incident reports. "We've compiled all anonymous claims submitted through the new direct line," she said. "As of this morning, 37 reports across 6 locations." He crossed his arms. "How many of those mention retaliation?" 14. "Escalate those to legal immediately. I want zero tolerance, and I want investigations logged within 24 hours of reports." She nodded and began typing. The head of HR entered next, carrying a folder. We've also received exit interviews from 3 former managers. 2 admitted to ignoring safety reports to meet quotas. 1 blamed district directives. Victor opened the file. Were these under Collins' region? All 3. He closed it. Permanent blacklisting. Notify our hiring partners. The HR head hesitated. There's one more thing. A part-time worker from Store 8 in Indiana filed a discrimination claim. Says they were passed over twice for hours in favor of someone less qualified. Their manager allegedly made comments about their accent. Manager's name: Zachary Pillar. Victor didn't pause. Terminate immediately. Send a formal apology to the employee. Offer to reinstate with full back pay for missed hours. Understood. He left the room and walked down the corridor toward the operations wing. A new team had been assembled to review district leadership company-wide. He stepped into their temporary workspace, a cluster of desks with maps, spreadsheets, and schedules plastered across the walls. A woman in her mid-30s pointed to a board. We've identified 3 sites with chronic equipment delays and above-average turnover, all under the same regional manager, Dale Whitaker. Victor's jaw tightened. Pull every report from the last year. If he buried anything, I want it on my desk by morning. She nodded without hesitation. By 6 p.m., Victor returned to his office. The sun dipped behind the skyline, casting long shadows across his desk. He sat without turning the lights on, letting the quiet settle. His phone buzzed, a forwarded message from Joanna. All shifts at Store 11 covered tonight. Valerie volunteered to train the new hire. She drew up the checklist herself. He stared at the screen a moment longer, then set it down. 15 years ago, he'd built this company with a mop in his hand and a promise to his mother that he'd run something honest. Somewhere between growth and scale, between boardrooms and margins, he'd lost track of the people who made it all work. But he wasn't lost anymore. He reached for the internal memo draft he'd started earlier that week and added a final line. Every district leader is expected to spend 1 overnight shift per quarter in uniform. No exceptions. He signed it, saved the file, and sent it to the executive team. By the time he stood to leave, the sky outside had gone fully dark, but inside, things were beginning to change. Not perfectly, not instantly, but meaningfully. And this time, he wasn't going to let it slip again.